Pretty good intro so far. Fallout 3 theme music. Oh,
What's up?
man. How's it going, man?
We're off to a rough start.
Yeah.
Doing
I assume
okay.
that-
Yeah, obviously dealing with some lighting issues, dealing with some sound and technical issues here at home, but looks like everything's
What's up,
starting
Kevin?
to straighten
How's it
out.
going, man? All right.
More into if it is indeed morning or evening or nighttime.
Kevin, I hope I
pull a
pronounced that
Truman
right.
To pull a Truman show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Yeah. Gotta love Jim Carrey.
So we finished off with episode 2, I believe, correct?
Yeah, and we had
He's here,
basically
okay. Hey, Kills.
we had basically agreed that we were gonna do a little bit more. I'm at least on my end. I'm gonna do a little less point by point, a little bit more just highlighting and doing some comparison notation with later episodes, so we can be a little bit more swift about this, so we're not taking weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks in order to get through what we need to say to give a capsule review, as it were. I tend to be very anal retentive about these things because I am, when it comes to any kind of literary critique or analysis, I am coming from the perspective of a storyteller, not so much a fan purist. And I think this may
That's probably more me, the Lord Guru.
some of the. What's up?
Oh, you're cutting out on our end.
Oh shit! Sorry.
You were for a second. I was just saying you were talking about the fan purist. So I was like, it's probably more me, the Lord Guru.
Well, right, and I think that that's part of why we've had a couple of off-show kind of butting heads, you and I, is because you are much more thoroughly versed in the lore of the actual property in its entirety.
Yep.
Much more versed in it than I am with the older titles. And I get a little frustrated because I'm not, and I said from the very beginning, I opened this whole thing with the caveat that yes, you were more expertise, you have more expertise in terms of the actual source material as a source purist. I am not approaching it as a source purist. I am approaching the material as a literary analyst, as a storytelling narrative critique. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of where we've had a couple of moments where it's been like, what the hell are you talking about here? I'm trying to make a point and you're just missing the point I'm making entirely for the sake of, well, that doesn't make sense because of X, Y, Z. It does if you're looking at this as an actual story, not as just this is what comes.
And I get that, but coming from a lore perspective and where things should be, this is why I see it from another angle as opposed to the way you see it as a storyteller. So
right, we're analyzing it from two different perspectives. You're looking through the lens of lore. I'm looking through the lens of analysis as a storyteller, and I think that's why we're not always translating.
Yeah, well, I mean, the compromise is like it's somewhat of a debate, but at the same time, we figure it out like where we're not understanding the point.
Right. It's not really a debate so much as a, given that I am seeing this, how would it apply if we look at it from the source lore. Where doesn't it line up? Because that can actually make any of the observations that I'm making from just what I know and I'm observing from the show that much worse. It can actually amplify the problem, and it really does shine through horrifically as we go further into the show, which would bring us to episode 3, The Head.
Yep.
I gotta say, I really enjoyed how this episode started with giving Cooper finally some human life backstory from before the war.
Right.
But I was a little bit taken off track when he was looking at Welzig's decapitated body, looking at it curiously, kind of sideways. All I could think was, why does he look confused, given the world he lives in? Wouldn't this almost be a everyday sight?
Well, I think he was curious as to why the head was taken to begin with, but I mean, there are bounties literally where you decapitate a head and turn that in for the proof. So maybe he's looking as a competitive,
Right. Like in Fallout New Vegas, when the NCR officer, the sergeant at Fort McCarran, has the bounties out on 3 specific raiders with Cook, the pyromaniac cannibal. He demands Cook's head, and he wants it intact. So it's one of the few and he wants the heads of all 3 of these raider leaders intact. So it's one of the few instances where he doesn't want you, fiends, thank you. He doesn't. You have to kind of go against your in-game training of always going for the headshot. You don't want to headshot these 3.
Right.
And every time I forget that and I destroy the fucking head.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to do, especially
I'm
with
not
the
gonna pay
anti-material rifle.
I forget, is it that he pay it out?
Like using like something like the anti-material rifle or the brush gun, or even a sniper rifle for that matter. It's pretty easy to do. I know I did it when I did my play. I think I did it with my playthrough, but I also had a mod for the fiends, such as Cook and the other 2, and they're actually voiced in the mod. There's an actual mod where they're voiced instead of like targets that you go to search out for. You actually talk to them and they trap you in. Like you talk to them, and you see Cook with a flamer burning up a Brahmin carcass. He's got it flayed out, and he's shooting a flamethrower at cooking it. He's like, the name's Cook.
See, I was under the impression he was just a cannibal, but...
Oh, no, they're all cannibals. I mean, they'll still, eat regular meat, but they'll still eat you too. All while taking jet.
Okay. See, for some reason, I was under the impression for some reason that they were exclusively cannibals, but yeah, they did have like cooked Brahmin steak and everything.
Yep.
And iguana bits.
You're cutting out a little bit there, Byron.
That had to be my favorite of all of the Fallout foods. Was squirrel on a stick. He's like, you get your meat wherever you can.
Yeah.
Yep. Funny sneak.
If I'm not mistaken, what was it? Prim. If you go into the little casino over there, there's I think it was Grandma Sparkles or some old lady in there, and she cooked up like some sort of it was like rad scorpion poison casserole or something like that. But it was like the way they cooked it somehow defeated the poison in a way, but if you had an open sore in your mouth, obviously it's a death sentence. So that's how she described
and
it.
90% of the folks around Right. Most people walking around on the surface, they've got open sores everywhere.
Right. Well, yeah, especially the raiders that were in the pit in Fallout 3, because they were suffering from the disease that would turn you into a troglodyte.
Yup. And I mean,
Yeah.
The next highlight I had for this episode was the radio check-in for Maximus, kind of with Officer Shortsight. Hell of a name, by the way. Listing one of your top officers.
Real quick, Byron, I think you might be in a bad spot.
How do you mean?
I said I think you might be in a bad spot in the house. Because, you'll cut out here and there.
All right, let me try moving location quickly.
Okay. Love the shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
Oh, boy.
Any better?
That should be better. Seems more reactive, and you're not fuzzing out too much on camera.
All right, that's better. Sorry about that. Like I said, we've had some technical weirdness here on this one. What's up?
Oh no, you're good.
All right. So yeah, the check-in with Shortsight, like I was saying, first of all, why would you willingly take the name Shortsight when you are an officer in what I assume is either intelligence or reconnaissance within the Brotherhood? If you're saying you're short-sighted, kind of a bad tell. A little bit of a red flag.
Especially over like a radio wave. Like, why would you say that? Like, for all they know,
right.
They could be tapped in from like another faction or whatever. I think at most you're trying to say like code words.
Buddy is a little mad over here because I turned the volume down on his show. Sorry about that.
You're fine.
But the voice modulator thing. This is where we come back to that problem.
Yeah.
Because when this officer calls in, Maximus is able to respond to him using the voice modulator. And he continues to try passing himself off as Titus, which again plays into this craven desire, this
for power,
jealousy, this envy to have the power armor, to have the title and all the trappings that come with it. And then to add insult to injury, for me at least, and push this nonsense with this character further, he then tries to cover himself in posthumous glory, even though he's not dead. He claims that, quote, his squire died with honor.
Honor and glory.
At that point, I officially gave up on Maximus being a redeemable character at that point. We're only 3 episodes in. We're less than 15 minutes into the episode. I see the dog. She is cute, yes. At that point, I was just done trying to give this character the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
However,
it's like the
it
cheat
did
code
also
for
solidify.
like his glory level.
Yeah, it did, however, like I said, solidify my impression that the writers were trying to cast him as sympathetic and likable, and they just utterly failed in the task.
Oh, for sure.
This is a poorly constructed character, period.
Like I said, even throughout the show, I did not care about him at all. Maximus didn't really display anything for me to like about him. It was just like his rise to power and like his resentment towards people like Dane and even Titus for that matter. It was like, how dare you be in that power armor? That should be me.
Right, like he has what a lot of people, in modern day refer to as main character syndrome.
Yep.
It's like, fella, I hate to tell you this, but this is an ensemble vignette style program, and of the three main characters, you are the least empathetic. I like Norm better than you, and he's a secondary character.
Yeah.
But
Especially when he even announces that he's a chicken. But he's smart.
Right. Like exactly there at the end of the first episode when he admits to Chet that he's a coward, and then later on when he references, when he admits to what's her face there, Barbara, that he was a coward, that he hid, that he scurried, that he ran.
Yeah.
He has at least the presence of mind to recognize his flaws, to recognize his shortcomings. And in his own way, he ends up overcoming them. But we'll get back to that later.
I think the thing about him is like he at least knows his shit doesn't, or at least he knows his shit stinks. Like he
Right.
knows where
Self-aware.
He's not good at, but where he is good at is like intelligence. Like if you think about it in the special category of like the skill base of the games, he's an intelligence build character through and through.
Absolutely.
Intelligence and I think a little bit of charisma.
Right. They dumped 9 points into his intelligence and made sure his charisma was at least at a 6, so he could start the game with some good speechcraft.
Dude.
Let's see what else. All right. My next highlight, and this one drove me crazy for 3 reasons. One, because I kind of knew it was coming. They hinted at it.
Well, hold on. What highlight are we about to discuss here?
The deployment of the new Squire.
Oh, yeah.
So let me read off my handwritten note here. At the 17.5-minute mark. Holy crap, I'm sort of impressed by the speed with which the Brotherhood got a new Squire dispatched to Maximus/Titus. But maybe it was a little too fast? Who can say? Except I don't think that the dental extraction that Maximus undertook would have taken that long to perform. And the repair was on screen. It was like that. Thaddeus, being Maximus's tormentor from the training camp, among the aspirants, felt a little deus ex machina to me. Like the showrunners don't do that. Don't do that.
Play a dodgeball over there.
Boy just whomped me with a freaking basketball. Hi. Thank you. Where was I? See, folks, this is. I love you, buddy. Fucking goober. Yeah, I see it. I see it. Believe it or not. But it felt a little bit too forced to me, as though the showrunners went out of their way to not only have established that he had an antagonistic character, kind of, giving him
It
shite
was more of a
at
group
training.
effort, but he was one of them.
Right. And to then just make certain that happens to be the aspirant who gets promoted to squire and sent off into the field to join him. First of all, they would have had to immediately pick a replacement for the fallen Squire Maximus.
Right.
Get that person debriefed, get that person equipped, make sure that person is on the vertibird, flown to Philly, and dropped off at the exact location he needs to be dropped off at, all in the very short span of time between the radio call and the actual drop-off. I'm calling bullshit.
Right. It was like an instant drop off. Like it was like what am I trying to say? Like a instant QRF, quick response force.
Right.
And even our
it made me think of that Ranger or that NCR signal that you get in New Vegas, where you can use the item to call in like a fire team to help you.
Yeah.
Where they're nowhere in sight. You can be deep in Legion territory. Use that emergency radio, and NCR troopers drop out of nowhere.
Or even like the mysterious
literally
stranger
nowhere.
perk.
They could be engaged in the middle of a firefight with death claws way on the west side of the map, and all of a sudden, boom, they're next to you in cotton coat.
Like I said, it's almost like mysterious stranger, but in military form.
Yep. It's messed up. So that drove me crazy because it breaks the conceit of don't use Deus Ex Machina, but they did it anyway. It breaks the timing conceit of distance because they have established distance and times of travel, a rate of travel through the show, and they also are breaking the preparation and deployment timeline that they had initially established back when they were first setting up the story for Titus and Maximus to head to Philly. So we've already got these establishments of how it will work.
So, okay. I was just thinking about it because you remember the bag that Maximus had taken for Titus, the big bag with the gun and everything in it?
Yeah, the gear bag.
Was it ever addressed that he needed a replacement firearm? Because I don't remember that. And Thaddeus had a whole bag ready to go for him.
I don't know. I can't remember if he said anything about that to.
I don't remember anything to that.
What I imagine it could very well be a standard issue that
that's what I was thinking, maybe, but yeah,
is deployed with the necessary gear. If there was a situation where something happened, that there was an encounter that was fierce enough that the knight lost their squire, the knight's not expected to drag around their own gear, so they would deploy the new squire with new gear. At least that's my presumption.
I mean, to be fair, the power armor and that strap, it's pretty obvious you could at least, put that over some power armor.
Right. It would fit. But again, I would assume that their presumption is if a squire is lost, expect to have to send out new gear.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just that bag, man. It messes with me because it's so. What am I trying to say here? It's like almost unnatural for how big this bag is.
Yeah, it's almost like it is supposed to go on someone in the power armor,
right?
And it could very well have been. It could very well have been, but if
it's just not practical combat wise.
No, but if this chapter of the Brotherhood, if we're seeing a splinter chapter, something like we saw with the Outcasts, something along those lines where they have strayed from the original mission and structure, it could very well be that the bags were always set up like that to be carried by the knights and paladins themselves. But this specific chapter may have changed its culture internally and become more reliant on, hey, the pissant squires are going to carry our shite, and become more, not monastic, but more almost monarchistic.
I could see that, but and again, this is from a lore standpoint, from games that I played with initiates that are under a knight, they carried weapons themselves, rifles, laser rifles, what have you.
Right.
And even throughout the show, I've seen all the initiates, even at the end battle, were all sporting the 10mm revolver, and I'm like, where are your rifles? You're going to war. What?
Right. Why are you sending these guys underarmed?
Right. And even the soldiers that they were fighting against had light machine guns, rifles, armor.
Right. They had basic armor.
Right. It didn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, there's definitely a schism there.
Mm.
And let's dig down a little bit. I'm going to stray off of this now. We're going to do a tangent. Let's dig down because you and I started having a conversation after the show the other day about Thaddeus.
Oh boy. And where to begin with them?
Well, I would open up the floor to you to begin on this one. Your impressions of Thaddeus, not just in this episode when he first appears. Well, let's just do a kind of a comprehensive.
It also reflects with what you said for how quickly he was deployed. So even then, not only was he briefly debriefed and deployed, he's just a goofy character. He's not ready for anything he's about to go into. In the introduction alone, he's basically kissing Maximus's feet and telling him, oh, Knight Titus, I'm here to serve you, blah, 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 blah. But it's to me, after that, his character, there's not enough of a soldier I see out of him. He's just a goofball. But I feel like he was done that way in some sort of fashion and comic relief. That's just my take on him.
Okay.
He was not meant to be taken as a serious character. And there may be some ideologies that are tied along to it.
That much I can lean towards. I can lean into a little bit. We weren't supposed to, from the drop, take him too seriously. But there were a couple of distinctive moments for him that I found were subtly telling. During the initial training sequence, when they're in the classroom, when Maximus gets whacked with the ruler because he can't identify a circuit properly, Thaddeus is the one who responds correctly. Thaddeus is also the one who pulled out a piece of equipment from the gear bag, informing Maximus that all creatures in the wasteland emit a specific, unique radiological identifying signature, and that they can track the ghoul across the wastes using that equipment. He may be a goofball, but he understands his gear. He understands their equipment. He understands the regimentation and the implementation of said equipment. He clearly demonstrates
that all may be very well.
Let me finish.
Like, as far as okay, go ahead.
He demonstrates capacity for information and how this equipment is supposed to be used.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're right in that he's definitely not prepared to be an active soldier. I think a far better use for him would have been as a scribe or a scholar within the proper brotherhood. If he could have been granted that opportunity. There's one thing that does make me think there is an indication he could have been a great soldier. And it comes after he has the scuffle with Maximus, or rather during that scuffle when he takes out the fusion core. Before he's able to, slip under Maximus and do that, though, Maximus stomps his leg and fucking just destroys his foot.
Yep.
How far and how long did this Yahoo, this poor goofball Yahoo, drag his busted up leg the whole time?
His toes were hanging by threads.
Right, allowing this fucking strange dog that he has no idea where it came from. Mm-hmm. He doesn't shoot it. He doesn't shoo it away. He lets it stay in his presence as a companion. Doesn't question it. So yeah, a little bit doofy, but telling of someone who is decent and honorable, who does not bring harm to something that is not trying to harm him, and tough enough, endurable enough to drag his busted ass however many miles through the wastes to that red rocket station and then onward still.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty tough customer.
It's commendable, sure, but in all reality, that foot, the way it was mangled, he would have bled out. I'm pretty sure there were arteries at least severed. Right. That's what I'm saying. Like,
but we've already suspended quite a lot of disbelief, and we are talking about a science fiction show based on a video game franchise. We have to suspend a certain amount of disbelief in order to enjoy the property if we don't enjoy it at all. We didn't enjoy it this much.
To the same though, if we're gonna at least enjoy it in that fashion though, we still have to take into account that stim packs were meant for broken limbs and blood packs to fill your health. I mean, there's a lot still to take into account for it. So there is still realistic elements in the universe. Although he made that much distance with that mangled foot, why didn't he at least try to patch it up or wrap it up or do something? Because let's be real, that foot should have came off.
Probably a couple of times at least.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to sit there and tell me the dude couldn't have had a bad step and it just twist his fucking foot off.
Oh, undoubtedly, get snagged on something and just rip it.
Right. Even if it's concealed in that boot that he had. I mean, it would pretty much deglove his fucking foot
off. This is where we can come into once again. Right, but once again, we can tie this into, it was an attempt by the writers and showrunners to flesh out this character and give him some depth of character, to give him some weight, something to root for and something to empathize with. Not stopping to consider that it breaks with certain world-building conceits that you just brought up. It breaks the stim pack can address broken limbs conceit, which tells me that the showrunners weren't paying attention.
Because specifically,
so as I mentioned before, they were trying to do something well, narratively, but they ignored previous world-building conceits, which you're not supposed to do if you're working within the confines of someone else's construction. if you're going to break the mechanics, you have to give us a reason.
There's a reason why I'm laughing, because I know how this could be rewritten in the fact of, or even like, like how they could shrug it off as, well, maybe along the way he took out his stim pack out of the bag and used it on him on the way. But I could just see that being like their way to get away from this topic in particular, their way to steer clear of it.
Right. It's details and minutia that they clearly did not account for. Now, there's going to be issues. There's going to be errors. Nobody being handed a giant property like this and being told, you have 18 months, make a show, or however long they had to make this. I doubt there's anyone who's going to do it perfectly. And some
Right.
folks may accuse you and I of being too nitpicky. But guess what?
You're still representing Fallout.
People do that. And there's a
Right.
reason we're being nitpicky. It's because you people didn't do your fucking jobs.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but it's just how it is. If you
That's
write
another thing I was just about to bring up, because I was thinking about meds and chems in Fallout. Why didn't he use Med-X?
right, that has to have been in his kit. He has to have had those kinds of supplies.
Right. Because, dude, I mean, the shock alone, just of that happening, like, I don't even know how that didn't kill him. Like,
Right.
looking at your foot literally being that mangled that the point of your toes are hanging off by a thread.
Literally dangling in the wind.
Dangling off.
But on the topic of Thaddeus overall,
Wait, hold on. One more point I gotta add, because the reason why I brought up Med-X, which was because of Fallout New Vegas, specifically when you meet up with the Legion, there's that one powder ganger that you walk into, and he's on a chair, and he's like, "Dude, what the fuck you got against us?" He's like, "I thought I had a bad day, and the powder ganger fucking Reaper showed up." And he tells you how he can't move because his legs were mangled up because of the Legion. He was like the second lottery winner out of all the other powder gangers that were crucified in the town.
Right.
But he even asks if you can give him Med-X just to, like, subdue the pain that he's in.
Right, just to numb himself a little.
Right. So that's kind of like the attention to detail I'm talking about here. Like, you're telling me Thaddeus got in that scuffle with Maximus in the power armor, gets his foot stomped on to the point of no recognizable foot left over. Like, literally bone fragments everywhere in his foot, even bone shown. It's poking out of his skin with dangled, toes. Like,
yeah, compound fracture.
Right. Like, when that foot stomped his foot, it was like a grenade went off with his bones. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. Maybe I'm being too much because I'm a lore enthusiast when it comes to Fallout, but I call bullshit.
No, I get it. I can definitely appreciate the call out of bullshit there. Who knows? Maybe he opened up his VATS menu and just ate a bunch of cheese wheels. But cheese for everyone. All right, song. Sorry, wrong Bethesda property. All hail Lord Sheogorath. That's something for another day entirely. But with regards to Thaddeus as a character overall, I actually did enjoy the character, even though there were two downsides to him for me as a secondary or support character. For one, secondary characters in programs or books like this, where you don't have a very large cast as it is, those secondary characters, even though they're mostly built on archetypes, they still have to demonstrate either of these things, either completely rigid character traits that do not budge an inch, so that they are stable characters against which to compare other characters, or they must experience some form of internal character growth. I don't think that happened with Thaddeus. He did shift a little bit, but it was external forces acting upon him and not so much him changing his personality or perspective. It wasn't anything like that. It was when the chicken fucker gave him the modified FEV virus.
We still don't know if that's what that was.
Right. I'm just postulating. Whatever weird chemical that was, that change that it's bearing on him. Sure, his character is growing or changing physiologically, biologically, from something outside of himself. And that's not necessarily the kind of character growth or change that you're looking for from a secondary character like this.
So I have a theory. The vials that Cooper takes and all the ghouls take to repress the ghoulification further to being feral, I think the quote-unquote chicken fucker guy is the supplier.
Oh, could be.
That's just my take on that. Because I think he knew very well what Thaddeus was turning into. Because he even said, well, where you're going, you're not going to have a problem with that anymore. Talking about the radiation.
That's right. That's not going to be right. That's not going to be a problem for you anymore, big boy.
Right.
And that's why I think it is an FEV variant of some sort. I think he fully expects him to become a big boy, a big super muty boy.
Well, here's why I differ on that, because the FEV was only found in vats and military installations. It was literally meant for super soldiers. So, given how
much they've already fucked with the Lord, do you think they're going to keep that consistent?
But here's what I'm saying. Since they already introduced the Enclave in the last episode, that being said, we already seen what was a sneak peek of a super mutant. That's what the big, giant arm that was, out of the... Yeah, that was a super mutant. So that's really the only way aside from that. Like, even though the Vault in Fallout 3, that was the reason why DC mutants were a thing. There was a Vault in Fallout 3 that also had the FEV virus, but it wasn't like something you could just walk into and pick up without turning into a mutant yourself. Because Harold, even, when he went to Mariposa with, what's his name? The guy that became the Master. Harold didn't get dipped into the FEV, but he was exposed to the particles that were coming up from the FEV, which turned him halfway into a mutant.
Right, it was like spores or something, right?
Well, it was kind of like an oxidization of the goop itself.
Right, he was exposed to it, but not immersed in it.
Right, and that's how you became a super mutant. Was you had to be dipped into a vat, basically mutant fried chicken. Basically, you're a normal person, and how FEV works. If you're exposed to radiation and you jump into a vat of FEV, you become a giant dumb brute mutant. But if you came out of a vault with not being touched from radiation, you became a prime normal mutant, which had intelligence. So that's how it worked in Fallout 1. But like the subjects that they would get from the wasteland would just be dumb mutants that were meant for brute force.
Right, grunts.
The prime normals would be people that are like lieutenants and whatnot, people of higher rank.
Right, their command structure.
Right. And trust me, they're hard to kill.
Right.
Especially Lieutenant Lou. Lieutenant Lou was the... Yes. Okay, the mutants referred to him as Lou, but yeah. He had like this monocle, like a red like cybernetic monocle and power armor.
Ah. Okay. I'm skipping ahead a little bit here for my notes. Oh, except for one thing really quick.
Yep.
Cooper. His initial refusal to give Lucy any water and then mocking her with the whole water everywhere and not a drop to drink. See, it was darkly amusing, yet also seemed to me in the moment needlessly cruel, which was a touch out of character for this character as I had perceived him thus far. Combative, yes. Brutal and brutally efficient, yes. Sadistic, though, that seemed a little out of touch with the character as presented thus far to me at this moment.
At this moment, I was about to say.
There is a much bigger moment later on in the series that for me took away a little bit from my overall impression of Cooper, that felt like an inconsistency of character. And while it may be shrugged off as, well, sometimes he just does what needs to be done, he didn't need to do it at all. But we'll come back to that later on, and that'll have to be probably our last deep dive episode on the Fallout series. As far as like him abandoning CX404 at this point, like when he tells her it's not my dog, well, yeah, he got what he needed out of the dog, used it to track down Wellseg's head. He doesn't wish the animal any harm or ill will, but it served its purpose, and it's not his dog. So
right.
Off he goes.
I mean, it's efficient. I was going to say it has to do a lot to do with efficiency. He's a bounty hunter, and he's been alive for literally, over 200 years.
Right. It's and even later on when he gets back, when the dog shows up again later on, he's at the campfire and he's petting the dog, and he tells him, sorry dog meat, which is a nice reference, you ain't him, meaning referring to Roosevelt, his old dog from when he was human. Like, he appreciates and is empathetic toward and even companionable with the dog, but it's not his dog. He misses his dog. It's a very human moment for a very inhuman character, which was really nice. But again, I'm getting ahead and jumping all over the goddamn place. I'm sorry.
I had something to add to that because, we're talking about Cooper here. Like, present Cooper before the bombs fell was, I'm sure a more moral, respecting character. But now we're talking about ghoulified Cooper, who's been around for over 200 years. So his sense of morals have had to shift given all the work that he's probably done. And reference as one of the best bounty hunters ever. So
the world that you live in is going to dictate some of your ethics.
I don't think he's ever going to be like he's not like an antagonist bad guy, but he's also not a good guy. He's an anti-hero. But he is, I don't want to say he's like, like a typical like raider fiend, like, he's gonna
No, it's
camp,
definitely not that.
but like
Um,
he does what he does to survive. But when it came down to Lucy and him and their engagement, like I think he's just kind of like nothing surprises him. Like, how do I
oh
put
yeah,
this? Yeah, like when he was like doing what he did to Lucy, like, oh, all the water but not a sipper. However he was phrasing it.
he said
But like,
water everywhere and not a drop to drink, which is a
right,
common
because
taunt.
everything's radioactive.
Right, it was a
Right.
common taunt among sailors when they were at sea. If you
Because of
drank all
salt
your
water.
bottled water too quick, they'd be like, "Hey, look at all the water you can't drink."
Yeah. So, like during that whole thing, because she was like so up top about this golden rule and, what you're not supposed to do, what you're supposed to do. And he's basically telling her, look, honey, I've been up here way longer than you since, way before you've been born. Give it a while. He even says it, and you'll look like me.
Right. Eventually, when she asks him, and I loved this line. She didn't ask, "Who are you?" She
What
asked,
are you?
"What are you?"
Yep.
And his response, "I'm you plus a little time."
Yep.
Brilliant answer. Because the whole idea of you may think you can hold on to your principles, but will you? Which is a callback to something that was said by Wellsig before his whole ordeal when he was
You have to
still,
adapt.
when he said to her, "Be careful, because be careful how much you expose yourself to this world, because you may not." Um, what kind of creature will you be when you've walked through it long enough, or something like that? I'm misquoting, but he does effectively
It's all
point
right. I
out to her.
misquoted myself, but
Yeah,
I got the point across.
right.
So
His basically just trying to warn her, you're naive right now, and you need to get with the program. I will be right back. I've had to pee for the last 5 minutes. So just
you're
give
all
me a
good,
minute.
man. Let's see here. Yep. So the thing about Fallout is, even if you are such a good-hearted person, when you go to the wasteland, you're not going to return the same vault dweller you once were. So, I mean, that being said, like who you once were, like, is pretty much gone by the time you get back. I'm sure I probably said that a couple different ways. Um, yeah, the wasteland just it changes you, and usually not for the better. When it comes to Fallout, there are very, very few good characters in Fallout. All for the simple fact of survival and things they've had to do to survive. Like, as far as Cooper, the ghoul that we're talking about, which is. I'll pull up a picture of him here in just a second. Cooper Howard. Oh, here we go. Which would be that guy right there. um, he was, in the military. I mean, he was even the spokesman for Vault Tech when they did their, um, like the Vault commercials, and like he was a pretty general,
He,
like good guy
he is
before the bombs fell.
he is Vault Boy.
Yeah. So as far as Cooper goes, anytime he sees the Vault Boy like icon or the figure that they use, or I would say what would be a better term, like
Their mascot.
mascot. I was trying to say mascot, it just wasn't coming out. But he would blow a hole like through like the billboards and stuff where the mascot's head would be. Just for the pure disgust of the company and what they were behind. Which we'll get into later on.
Right. I imagine there may have been an element of self-loathing in that too.
Well, I think it has to do with like him reflecting and be like, "Damn, I was a part of that. Like, I'm a part of the
Right,
reason
that's what I
why
mean.
this." Yeah,
That's what I mean. Like he's like, oh fuck, I was part of this whole goddamn thing.
right.
So moving on into speaking of Cooper, episode 4, the ghouls. And right off the bat, the episode started really strong, I thought, with the presentation of Roger.
Oh, Roger.
Right away, he is teetering on the edge of going feral, growling, saying, my name is Roger. My name is Roger.
Trying to keep himself from turning.
Right, to keep himself at least kept held together. I enjoyed how the interior of the house was kind of this is a technical thing. This is more about principal photography and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
The lighting on the scene throughout the early portion of this episode had a kind of a yellowed, almost jaundiced, diseased look to it. It was subtly played, but that sort of environmental saturation, I have to tip my hat to the folks behind the photography and the principal cinematography of that scene. They did an excellent job kind of honing the tone of that moment and of that environment.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I'm about to bring that up here in just a second.
Oh, and the vials that Cooper uses and the ghouls use to keep themselves from running feral. They appear to be inhalables, right?
Yep.
I was watching this show, and when I paused it, the Amazon X-ray thing comes up. Turns out that the guy who played Roger, his character, the actor's name is Neil Huff, which makes for a very weird, dark coincidence.
That's interesting. He kind of looked familiar to me. Oh, okay. It's not the same guy. But I thought he was somebody else. There's a guy that was in Shawshank Redemption who also voiced the Securitron in New Vegas. I can't remember the name of the Securitron, the cowboy one.
Oh, right, the guy, the cowboy Securitron who dug you up.
Victor.
What is it?
His name was Victor.
Victor, that's what it was.
Yep.
Talk about like spooking. I already don't like AI and I didn't like it then. And when that fucking spooked me out back in the day, man.
That's who I thought it was. The Ghoul Roger I thought was William Sadler.
I know that name.
He played in Shawshank Redemption. He was the one of the guys that betted on Andy because they were fresh fish in the prison.
Okay.
He was like right at the beginning. Yeah, he was like taunting the guy that was crying.
Yeah. So
but I thought that's who that was, but it's not. But it looks just like him.
Yeah, it kind of does. And it's a weird moment because there's a brief moment of brutality here from Cooper, but it's
That's a
obviously
reference here.
it's obviously a mercy killing. Okay, yep. All right.
Yep. That's who I thought that was. I'm like, I kept looking at him.
I can see it. I can definitely see it. One. But Cooper asks Roger about a memory. He asks him, tell me about. I can't remember the exact question, but he basically.
What was your favorite food?
Right.
Food tasted good.
Right. What was your favorite food?
And he said lamb mac and cheese.
Yeah. He wants Roger's last moment to be something pleasant. Something happy. He wants to take him back to a good place in his mind before ending it.
Yep.
Again, there's this glimmer of Cooper's humane nature still being present. And it's gorgeous to behold because it does show you that the monstrous thing you see on screen is not necessarily a monster. It is capable of being empathetic, of having care for his fellow man, especially since he too suffers potentially the same fate down the road.
Unfortunate circumstances.
Right. He is giving Roger what he hopes he might eventually get for himself someday, which is a moment of peace before the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it's compassionate. It's darkly compassionate, but given Cooper's nature, dark compassion, I think, is about the best we're going to get out of him.
Yeah.
Followed by a great line, which is, ass jerky don't make itself.
Yeah, when you start carving into Roger there, man.
Yeah.
Old ass jerky.
Okay. This next moment is going to spiral into another ramble. We finally, a little bit into the episode, come to a point where Lucy fights back against Cooper.
Yep.
In a way that initially my first thought was, don't put that in your mouth. You don't know where it's been. And I know when zombies, I sorry, kiddo. It just is what I thought when I was watching the show. What do you want? My 11-year-old poked her head out. She's like, what? I know that in movies and films, when a zombie bites you, you turn into a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
If you bite a ghoul, did you become a ghoul? No, just kidding.
No, I think you get I would at least think you would get some sort of disease from it.
Right, disease, some kind of we'll do the whole Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind reference and say you got corporate disease. But
or a Game of Thrones, you become one of the what were they, the stone people, the stone men.
Yeah, the stone skins.
Yeah.
But when she bites his finger off,
I love the line he delivers.
It's right, there. Oh, what is it exactly? His exact words.
I know exactly how it says it. He says, "Well, that is probably the closest thing that we've had to an honest exchange."
Oh yeah, like afterwards. Yeah, when he cuts
her
finger off.
Yep.
But in the moment, he snarls at her. There you are, you little killer.
Yep.
He knew she had the potential. Why? Because it's human nature.
We're all animals.
He's been around human nature for a very long fucking time. He knew there had to eventually come a breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
Uncertain of exactly how far this naive fault girl might have to be pushed, he discovered where that moment where that line was. And then, yes, ultimately he ends up cutting off her finger in response.
Yep.
Very vital to me as someone who is obsessed with semiology, with symbolic moments and narrative. What finger did she bite off? His trigger finger.
Yep.
On his primary hand. So that's the finger he cut off of her.
Yep.
Because until that moment, she had not, quote, pulled the trigger.
Eye for eye, tooth for tooth.
Yes. Now, unlike her, he saves her removed digit for later use, which comes in handy for him. But we'll get to that in a moment.
Pretty sure she does too.
She gets a finger attached by Snip Snip in the Super Duper Mart. Snip Snip pulled out a Wastelander's finger.
I remember it was a darker skin tone and everything.
Right. That's not what the skin tone thing didn't matter to me.
No. The only thing I was saying about it was...
Oh, yeah. You could tell that it wasn't hers.
It was almost like to the point of like the corpse where it was starting to decompose. Yeah.
Desiccated.
Yeah.
It's brilliant to me because of what happens a short bit later in the episode. Lucy, through Snip Snip and that whole thing, first of all, why the hell would it reattach her finger and then immediately say, oh, well, I'm harvesting your organs, and then tranks her? Why bother with the fucking finger then? That makes no sense.
I think it was a medical procedure out of programming it responded to.
Right.
And as it was like jumbling around the coding, it was like, oh, by the way, I'm harvesting your organs.
Right.
Like it had to remind itself what it was, the purpose was.
Which at this point, program degradation, not a big shock.
Especially with the, I don't want to say Mr. Gutsy, but what was the name for the regular?
Mr. Handy.
Mr. Handy. Mr. Gutsy was a military model.
Yep. So what fascinates me here is that the finger that she gets attached is the finger of a Wastelander, of someone who has been in combat, who has been in strife and struggle, who has probably been in combat, who has killed before. Mm-hmm. Now, up until this point, Lucy has been armed with a tranquilizer gun. And when she busts free from her potential operation, she makeshifts Snip Snip into her potential weapon with the Abraxo cleaner loaded into his typos for the guys running the Super Duper Mart to be threatened with. She doesn't end up killing them. She demands the release of the ghouls because she is, again, naive, doe-eyed, wants everyone to be free.
And I feel humanitarian. Like, now, as far as being, like, what am I trying to say? Like, she's very moral supportive when it comes to that. Like, she's very empathetic, like you've said before. It's her nature.
Right. It's in her nature that she grew up with.
Yeah.
But then she wants to let the one ghoul who's, my name is Martha. My name is Martha. Did she not learn from
Roger
earlier with Roger? If this woman is supposed, I'm sorry, this was an inconsistency.
Well, hold on. There's even another inconsistency to that. The other captive feral ghouls that would have obviously reacted to her.
Right. That were like banging on the glass.
Right.
As she's being stretchered along. She was conscious for this. She had to have observed this. She has to know.
I mean, to me, something's trying to break out. It's a danger.
Right. Danger Will Robinson. And all you have with you is Snip Snip running with a Braxo cleaner. You've seen the kind of shit that Cooper can get launched at him, and he's still up and walking.
I was about to bring that up, too.
You think Snip Snip's going to be able to stop these fucking things charging at you like rotting tanks? No. Right. If this woman is supposed to be brilliant, and she has demonstrated to this point to be very clever, pretty intelligent.
To a degree.
Why would you risk it?
I think she's naive in combat.
Not right.
In certain instances.
It's just a moment that it drove me crazy because it was inconsistent.
That, and I think her morals betrayed her too.
Right. It could be a combination of her own personal moral compass. These are bad people. They're keeping people, chained up and in cages.
Organ harvesters.
Right. They're a bunch of repo men of human organs.
Really lazy organ harvesters, I might add.
Right. Very lazy. So I'm going to take away their profit. And Martha, at first, she tries to talk her down, to reason with her. And then when she does finally drop to the floor and grab a gun,
Mm-hmm. The 10 millimeter.
Right. Her first kill, topside. She pulls the trigger with a finger that is not her own.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is already probably killed before. Only by accepting the wasteland, finally accepting it, because she had no choice, can she finally kill and thus survive. The symbolism there is a little, you need to do some dissection to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Someone in that writer's room, one or two people, actually have some talent. Whoever they are, they need to get the hell away from Amazon Studios. They need to find better people to work with because they're clearly talented. They know what they're doing. They have the capability to be skilled showrunners or storytellers of their own, but they're lashed to this abomination. Sorry.
Good little shot there with the ghouls.
Yeah. Shambling tanks, man.
Indeed. And the first thing they do, I mean, even like in Fallout 4, when they attack you, they literally come full force at you and try to tackle you to the ground.
Oh yeah, in Fallout 4, they're almost like the freaking sprinting zombies from 28 Days Later, the rage zombies.
Oh, the infected, yeah. Yeah, they ended up like starving to death. But I did hear there is going to be a 28 years later, which I'm glad you brought up 28 days later or 28 weeks later. That's another thing I want to get into and do a deep dive of. Because I actually watched 28 Days Later like a week ago.
I've only ever seen the first one, 28 Days, and that was a long time ago. So
good movie though.
I could always use a rewatch. Okay. This is also the episode that
Hold on. Just for effect, I got to do this.
Sure.
Oh. Just to convey it a little bit.
Those ones you don't understand.
Oh. Real quick, before I even start this, that glass, there is no way they couldn't have broke through that glass.
Absolutely should have been able to.
Don't be scared. You're free.
I love this scene. Absolutely love this scene. Perfectly executed. I mean, look at that.
Oh gosh.
Hello there. Goodbye.
Lunch meat.
Literally. Literally.
Not the best thing to say, but the coolers they were in, lunch meat.
It was super duper mart for real.
Clean up on aisle 6.
Yep.
And hey, you know what'll make cleaning that up super easy, boys and girls? A Braxo brand cleaner.
That was another effect I had to admit they did very good detail to, was the Abraxo cleaner when it hit the couch and it started to like melt away the couch.
Yeah,
Discolor it.
this is actually really well done.
Highly acidic.
To say the least. So this was also the episode wherein Norm and Chet make their way into Vault 32 to investigate it. And my goodness, I have to say, I have watched, since putting together my notes and writing my synopsis takeaway, I got actually 2 of them here. One, which was my actual synopsis, and then a secondary, much smaller synopsis on other people's reviews that I have watched on YouTube. There's one channel who I've long enjoyed and respected their perspective on fantasy and sci-fi. Channel called Shadiversity, or Night's Watch. He does a lot of video game, pop culture kind of reviews and discussions, what have you. And they did a review of Fallout. They weren't terribly impressed. And I was taken aback because there was something about this episode that they even went into this specific episode and Vault 32 and the mystery behind it in decent amount of detail in their review, but they completely missed something. And I was like, okay, maybe they just overlooked it. I watched the rest of their review video. They didn't touch upon it. And I watched 6 or 7 other review videos about the show, and nobody touched upon it, even when they brought up Vault 32 specifically.
Mm-hmm.
There's a holotape being played in one of the labs that Norm passes by, and it's talking about the Rat Utopia experiment conducted by I think it was Jacob or James Schumer. I don't remember what his first name was, but this was an academic laboratory experiment, a sociological experiment conducted back in the 1940s or 1950s, wherein this gigantic rat enclosure was constructed and a host of rats put in with all kinds of accommodations, all kinds of toys, games, trips, tracks, all kinds of unlimited access to food, unlimited access to water, their own little compartments. It was gigantic, so that they could set up their own little enclaves, their own little hovels, their homes, what have you. And each and every time that this experiment was run, where the rats were given anything and everything that they could possibly want ad infinitum, every single time within 5 or 6 generations, the colony would go extinct. Overabundance leads to indulgence. Overindulgence then leads to population crash because it creates these aberrant behaviors in the populace of these rats. And it was determined or extrapolated that this very possibly could happen to human beings as well, because our behavioral patterns are often observed or synced up and tested against laboratory rat style experiments.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they were trying to connote with this brief reference was that that's what actually happened to Vault 32, was that they were a human extrapolation or attempt to reproduce the rat utopia experiment in a vault setting. Somebody down there recognized what was happening, but they were one of the enclaves or one of the cliques that couldn't do anything about it because they couldn't reproduce. They were either too weak and too feeble, or they didn't hoard enough food. They could not fight against the ones that had become deranged and savage and went on murder sprees, as happened in the rat experiments. That's my takeaway.
Very similar to that's happened in real life.
If that is what the showrunners were hinting at, which I suspect, they were very subtle about it by only playing that holotape for about all of 15 seconds with the audio. But why didn't anybody else catch that? How did these people? And again, I still enjoy and respect Shadiversity and his crew over there at Night's Watch, but those guys are supposed to be experts in literary analysis and reviewing films and television. I'm a nobody, a schmuck.
Don't say that.
How did they not catch this? How?
Yeah.
Or, again, am I just being too nitpicky? Am I jumping at shadows?
No, because the same could be said for me, like being, from a lore standpoint, there's the inconsistencies of lore and how certain things are affected and how certain things function, but are being taken a different step. And we've discussed that, even like the ghoulification thing, like when you become a ghoul, there was no real drug that we knew of that repressed the further feral ghoulification. Like there was nothing that, they just lived the way they lived.
Right. And it was always my understanding that it was they could heal themselves by exposing themselves to radiation, but that would further deteriorate their mind.
Yep.
That was my understanding.
And as for super mutants, they just can go through it no matter what.
Right. To them, it's just like, oh, this.
Just another spot.
Yep.
But, yeah, no, there was something very similar that actually happened in real life. If you're not familiar with the Stanford prison experiment.
Oh, yes. The students who were brought in, half of them were prisoners, half of them were guards. Yep.
Yep. And if I'm not mistaken, they didn't last a week.
It
was a very short period of time. I do know that.
I think it was 6 or 7 days. It may have been exactly a week, but I think you're right. It did not go on very long at all.
It was supposed to be like a month experiment.
Yeah, and it didn't last. Was that Stanford or was that Columbia?
Stanford.
It was Stanford. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the guards literally, even the interviews at the end, they pretty much, they didn't even understand what they were inflicting. It was, I don't know how to explain this. I guess it was the energy kind of playing ping pong back and forth between the prisoners and the guards themselves. And they were just matching the energy. It was just bouncing back and forth. Okay, well, the guards are going to do this. Well, we're going to rise up and do this.
Right.
Then, the guards would play against the prisoners and make matters worse. and by degrading them even further of their own, of like their own human, like
Dignity.
rights, basically dignity and rights.
Yeah, and anything like that, where you're going to have this massive imbalance in your power dynamic, someone's going to end up eating the shit sandwich, and that's putting it. Yeah, that's putting it lightly. These guys weren't just eating the shit sandwich; they were being force-fed shit sandwich through a tube.
Yeah. And that was the thing, though, was like to keep the control, the guards would find like more and more like fouler ways to conduct their job, against the prisoners. Like they would do a lot of a lot of things that would take their dignity away, whether it be peeing on them or whatever. It got worse as it progressed.
Yep.
And it was like, how much further could it have gotten?
Right, like by day 4, they were the people playing the students playing guards. They refused to give the prisoners their midday meal.
Yep.
And then when they gave them
really starving them,
when they gave them their evening meal, I think it was the 5th day, they brought in one serving and told the prisoners, if you want to eat, fight for it.
Yep.
One plate they brought in, and they had their figure out to share. These guys ended up like wailing on each other, trying to just get a bite of food.
Yep.
Now you put that kind of pressure on anyone, they're going to snap. But in the case of something like the Rat Utopia experiment / Vault 32, what do you do when everything you could possibly need or want is provided for? You turn into, the tendency is for people to turn into degenerates. Now, there is a difference between, obviously, rats and humans, in that our ability to understand another species is obviously limited by the fact that we are not that species.
Indeed.
However, from what we can discern to date, human beings have an impetus towards some sort of external drive, a need for purpose. If we have no purpose, we become aimless, listless. That's when we begin to devolve and degenerate.
Yep.
Rats don't have that same drive or sense of purpose that we know of. And if your needs are provided for as an animal, you don't have much else to turn to other than to degenerate into some weirdo, some aberrant behavior. Because the behaviors you would normally engage in to ensure your survival, they have been seen to already by some unknown external force that's going to trip you out of your natural native progression and instincts. You're going to behave differently than you normally would. In the case of the rats, there was even one batch that showed up in the second iteration of the experiment that they were called the beautiful ones. These were male rats who had given up on the attempt even to mate, and they spent 24 hours a day grooming themselves to the point that they stopped eating and would starve to death.
That's fucked up.
Put that in a vault.
Yeah.
We already know how badly the people in the vault snap.
Well, see, that's the thing. I was about to bring another thing up about that is all these are experiments. Each one of these vaults are their own experiment. And they're, it was openly discussed in a further episode. But the fact of the matter is, like, when it comes to, especially, let's say, like first or second episode, where they were talking about the water chip malfunctioning.
Episode 2.
Yeah, it was episode 2. So at that point, it was obviously a take from Fallout 1 when they did that. But when the water runs out, even then, when you're rationing such a valuable, essential commodity such as water, what do you think they're going to do to each other? Like the vault dwellers themselves for that resource.
Oh yeah, everything else goes out the window.
Absolutely.
Their whole structure of civility and decency out the door.
Whether it be water or food, for that matter. So, yeah. As for Vault 32, I feel like I have a couple other theories of what happened there, but because let's be real, Vault Tech, it could have been anything. We're not
Right.
sure entirely what
Right.
happened.
Could have been any number of things.
Right.
They could have piped in some kind of aerosolized jet or psycho, for all we know. And these people just went haywire on ham on each other. Who knows?
Well,
the only reason
that wouldn't have happened because jet was manufactured outside of the vaults.
Oh, okay.
It was actually made out of Brahmin dung or Brahmin poop.
Oh, God.
Yep.
Gross.
If you go to Reading and Fallout 2, that's when you start to manufacture jet, like a new form of it.
Okay.
But yeah, it was made out of Brahmin shit.
Jesus. No wonder the Raiders use it. But like I said, the only reason I lean towards the hypothesis that I present there is because of that holotape, which, if that was their intention, again, I come back to beautiful inclusion, quite ingenious to include that, but it was so small. Obviously, it wasn't noticeable because people who are purportedly experts at doing this sort of analysis, they all missed it.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. The recipe for jet alludes to the drug being produced with Brahmin fertilizer.
I caught this reference to the experiment, the Rat Utopia experiment. How come none of the other folks critiquing this show caught that?
Well, see, I kind of figured that in general, being a Fallout fan, as we already know, like I said, the vaults themselves are the experiments.
Right.
So they played a number of factors in which each vault is going to somewhat fail. Maybe a couple that will probably still flourish, but majority of them are going to fail due to the experiment.
Right. What you'd be able to tell me, because you're a bit more knowledgeable, actually a lot more knowledgeable. Were there any vaults set up as control tests?
Control tests, such as what exactly?
Well, in any laboratory setting, in order to properly render a result for observation purposes to yield your conclusions, you have two sets of the experiment. You have a control group and you have the variable group. The control group, you don't introduce anything to. You just have the basic setup, the necessities for.
I think the control was always the overseer in this case.
Well, no, I mean more, not the people in the vault. The vault itself. Was there ever a vault that was set up not to be run an experiment upon, but to be actually set up as a sustainable continuation of mankind?
As far as lore goes, well, if you take into account for Vault City, I think that was the only one that I have any knowledge of still flourishing, but they made their society outside the vault with the Gek, which was the Garden of Creation kit. So they made their own city outside the vault.
Okay.
So they didn't completely die off and nothing really went wrong. They still had the order of an overseer, but it was in a city format. They had walls, they had turrets all over the walls, armed guards.
So they had the exterior works.
Yeah,
see.
But it was because of the Garden Creation Kit they were able to do that. So
See,
I
even
think they
that-
were meant to, make it.
Okay.
So that much
Because-
I do know in Fallout 2, the Vault City. They also had a slave thing too.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, because otherwise, like I understand the conceit of setting each vault up as its own experiment, but without a control group, you can't render a reliable observation result.
So I think there is, because as far as Vault Tech goes, I believe there is some form of headquarters monitoring all of this. Like each one of the vaults, I think there's like a form of way to check in cameras and tell the water levels, to be able to monitor all the vaults.
Okay, so sort of a central panopticon.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be your control then. That would be your
Right.
control group, where the observations come in, and that is set up to be sustained alongside or parallel to the vaults. All right. So, yeah.
Yep.
That brings us to the end of episode 4. Just at this point, I was really taking a shine to Norm as a secondary character. Cooper and Lucy, obviously, I'm still on board with at this point in the show. Maximus, at this point, I don't really care for him. I don't care about him.
Yeah.
And there's been inconsistencies and hints at ideologies being threaded into the show, what people refer to as the message, that are starting to become more noticeable. They're still not overt. That comes in the next couple episodes.
Yeah, they start to show up
It
like
ramps
groups
up
and
badly. Now, and this is a gripe of mine on a personal level with regards to a lot of these streaming shows. It seems like the ones that are halfway decent in the first few episodes, this is becoming a pattern. They rope you in with characters or plot lines that are interesting, tolerable, and maybe in some cases, entertaining. You might even have a thought-provoking moment or two. But then slowly but surely, this modern audience horse shit starts creeping in like black mold, infecting and taking over everything it touches, like the blob, okay, or the goo, or not the goo, the stuff.
there's
right?
so much I could talk about right
There was
now.
this really terrible 80s horror movie. I don't know if you saw it. It was called The Stuff.
Yep, I watched it.
Okay, yeah, like the living marshmallow stuff. Oh my God. Let me tell you, I was a child when that movie came out. And when I saw it, I looked at my mother and I said, well, couldn't you just make a bunch of fluffernutter sandwiches and beat this thing? Now, obviously, I wasn't thinking in the logic of an 80s horror film, but it was just goofy. It was silly. It was nonsense. But you had to take it deadly serious within the confines of the movie because just like this ideological horseshit, you can't swallow enough of it. It will kill you.
Yeah.
The same end result. Stop it. You put that down right now. Sorry.
So I got to bring this up because you're bringing that up. If I'm not mistaken, Amazon did Rings of Power with the Lord of the Rings along with the Halo show. And both of those are an absolute disgusting pile of manure. The new Star Wars Alkali, I'm not well, it's Disney. I've also heard that's another big giant pile of manure. Um, Silent Hill 2, the remake, is also doing things for moderate audiences.
Dude. Okay. I first heard about that like 6-7 months ago when they said that they were going to be scaling back some of the psychologically traumatic visuals. It's a psychological horror game.
Right.
That
That literally
is genre.
defeats the
What are you
purpose.
doing?
It defeats the purpose.
Like, you know what? Let's go ahead and take the very thing that popularized this franchise, which is to disturb and unnerve you. And because your precious modern day fifis get so easily jumbled and hurt, and your nerves are frayed from, I don't know, never learning how to take a hit in the jaw and keep moving. We're going to put pillows around the horrors in Silent Hill now, and they're going to hug you to sleep.
Did you hear what they did to the
I want my
nurses?
monsters trying to kill me.
Did you hear what they did to the nurses in Silent Hill?
I have heard / seen also the character models, and once again,
well, you're aware of what Silent Hill represents, right? With the monsters, their manifestations of
of your guilt, of your,
right.
And their manifestations of any powerful emotional exercise or experience you're having. Silent Hill 3, the girl's Heather's like terror at her impending labor. There were creatures that walked around or dragged around with swollen bellies, and people were confused about that. It's like, what's to be confused about that? They represent her anxiety over her own changing body and her, body horror and disgust or self-hatred and her confusion about what's going on with her. That is physiological horror, yes, but it is also psychological. It represents what she is going through. That is what Silent Hill does. It taps into your psyche and tortures you with it. Everything about the realm of Silent Hill is intended to be a reflection of the soul that is coming into contact with it.
So the nurses in Silent Hill 2, they took the cleavage of the nurses and decreased them. That's the thing, is like the manifestation of the nurses is obviously lust because they're nurses, and coming from a male character, we experience certain things, but
Right.
It's like they're trying to take that away from the male character and like censor it in a sense.
Right, without even understanding the narrative cause for it. James Sunderland, in the first Silent Hill 2, his wife is dying of a wasting disease. She can no longer get any kind of pleasure out of sexual contact or congress with her husband. This is also frustrating to him, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, his wife, the woman he has dedicated himself to and is partnered with, is dying. But before her physical bodily death has come the death of the romance or romantic capacity in their marriage. That part of his life is already dead. And now he is in mourning of that connection, and he's in mourning of his wife is wasting away in front of his eyes. He cannot even share the intimacy of that exchange with her. But he's going to the hospital to visit her every day, to spend time with her, to be with her. But he can't connect with her in that intimate way that husbands and wives are intended to. The only females that he has contact with in this hospital are nurses. Now, as we mentioned, he's a male. He's going to have those that are just still creeping up in his head. That's called nature.
Right.
And he's going to end up imposing a lot of his own sexual frustrations onto those nurses. It's going to warp his perception of them.
Indeed.
Silent Hill is going to take that and amplify it to about 6
And manifest it.
and manifest it and turn them on him as an enemy.
Yep.
To torture him with it.
And that's what everything is in the as an enemy. Everything is a manifestation of your guilt, of any emotion that you share of your character. Silent Hill warps those entities of feeling, emotion, lust, urges, anger.
And clearly he is conflicted over this. That's why the nurses attack him.
Yep.
Because he wants to be punished over this. He feels he deserves to be punished for it. Particularly given the fact that he ended up killing his wife. He put her out of her misery because she was wasting away.
Yep.
I'm not going to argue the morality or the ethics of doing what he did. The fact of the matter is that amped up his guilt to about 1,000. That's going to end up landing him.
Silent Hill loves that.
Right. He's shining like a fucking beacon.
Yeah.
And of course, he's been there before, according to the letter that she sent him from beyond the grave. They've been there before.
Right.
It's going to look back and say, ooh, not only is this a brightly burning candle, we already know this one.
Right.
That is candy to a baby right there for a place like Silent Hill. So, yeah, lots of dumb shit happening in the video game space. Thank you, kiddo.
Video games, movies, shows, all of it.
And especially games. Like, it's
I resort to indie games or older games anymore when I do play games. I go back to older titles.
Right. Back when they were still, enjoyable. And you didn't get served a 15.5-hour lecture in the form of a turn-based RPG or what have you.
Like Call of Duty, I heard, I guess, did something about ammunition or something.
Yeah, I
heard about that.
Smash JT. Speaking of other video game world nonsense, I'm sorry about the big thing that I went off on Hill there.
No.
Video games.
But I had to bring it up.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah.
Tekken. I love the Tekken games.
Mm-hmm.
I've always enjoyed them. I don't know when this happened. I was listening to the Side Scrollers podcast this morning, and I usually am a day or two behind on them. So I think it happened yesterday morning. But this fellow who works on the Tekken game series put out a tweet. Someone contacted the folks at Namco with a screen capture that they took of someone he had been in a competitive match against, kind of shit talking him in DMs on Twitter, saying, I don't like that move or that style that you use. I'll be starting an attack and mid animation, you'll just do this stupid little jab, and you do the crouch jab, the quick little punch, and it interrupts my attacks. It's cheap and it's stupid. You should learn how to actually play the game. Like, just ragging on the guy. He misspelled jab. Now,
how do you misspell jab?
Think about it. There's an ethnic slur that if you were to turn the B upside down, what do you get? Okay.
Oh boy. I don't know why I'm having such a blonde moment here thinking about it.
Jap.
Oh, okay.
I don't know the ethnicity of either of the players involved, but this guy wrote to Namco, tweeted at them saying, "Hey, this guy was using ethnic slurs against me. He says it's a an ethnic slur tactic to do this cheap move. Can you look into this? And a guy who is in charge of, he's like a director of community relations or something for Tekken, for the entire franchise. He says, we will look into this, and if we discover that we can tie it to a username or an account, we will ban that player from the game.
Jeez.
Did the transgression happen on your platform? No. Did it happen on your servers? No. Then you have no jurisdiction here. I am sick and fucking tired to death of all of these video game companies saying that what you do off of their platform can affect what they do to your account on their platform. I'm sorry, but as far as I'm concerned, as soon as you are no longer actively signed on to whether it be EA or Ubisoft or Bethesda, Obsidian, whatever company, whatever game you're playing, while you're on that game, if you're using their server to communicate with other players, sure, you are bound by their terms of service. I grant you that. Fine.
So I gotta ask.
But if you go to talk on something like Discord or Twitter or whatever, that's not their fucking property. They need to fuck off.
100% agree. Any other platform, if you're disclosing or talking about any other matter that it has nothing to do with them, 100% nothing to do with them, and they should have any sort of jurisdiction to then,
jurisdiction. That's what it comes down to for me. Like, even if I go to Discord and I start talking shit about YouTube, guess what? YouTube can go fuck themselves. I'm having the conversation on a different platform. I haven't agreed to anything on YouTube while I'm using Discord.
And that could even apply to like just living everyday life, not even bothering with the platforms, and somebody happens to notice who you are and record you, and they're like, "Oh my God, can you believe what such and such or who said what?" And they take that and then they play it against you. It's like, but I guess what I'm trying to say here is like, even that could be applied to that. Like, if I'm not on a platform, that shouldn't still apply to me.
Right. Like, mind your own fucking business kind of thing.
Right. Like, I'm living my life. But, that's like, I've seen it with like other people that'd be like on another platform, and then they get caught. Somebody records them. They say a slur or whatever. And then they're banned from that platform. And it's like, but did they say it on the platform though?
Exactly. It's like, no, some third party dipshit did it. You had a question, brother?
Oh, yeah. Because we brought up Alkalite Star Wars.
Yeah.
I just wanted your take on this here clip on the ideologies, if you will. Just take a listen here.
Oh yeah, this.
When people watch The Hate You Give, what do you want them to walk away with? I know everyone has a slightly different feeling.
Well, I mean, white people crying actually was the goal.
Thoughts?
Several. One of them very, very short. A 2-word thought. Which is, whatever. People are going to talk shit. It was my understanding that clip was from an unrelated project she was talking about. That it had something to do with some other production that she had done. But again, the statement and the sentiment in and of itself, all I can think is, you want to set these new rules. If you want this to be the new way we proceed forward in dealing with one another as fellow citizens, I'm at the point now where, okay, we'll play by your stupid rules, and you're not going to like the result.
Right.
Because the result is going to be me saying, oh, am I being too harsh? I guess that was the whole point.
Correct.
Even I, and I'm fairly milquetoast about these things, even I have a point where if you keep pushing me, I'm going to plant my feet and say, I'm barely alive at this point. You just tried to shove me over a cliff. You do it again, I'm throwing you over that cliff. It's going to be you or me, and I'm going to pick me every time. So was my son, apparently. Hey! No throwing shoes, dude. Oh, sorry, the mask. What are you doing? You want me to wear this? All right, hold on a second. You want to wear it? Yeah, do you want to? Yeah. You sure?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was trying to bring up before, though, with the whole. It just seems like things are trying to be baited, if you will, just for the response.
Right, and that's another thing, is maybe it's very possible, given whose show she was on, Trevor fucking Noah.
She was an alkalite.
What's up?
She's an alkalite, the new Star Wars show.
No, I know. I'm saying, look at whose show she was on.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how many people are going to see that clip before it just got dredged up? All of 50 people. Whoopity fucking do. And all of them in downtown Manhattan. Like, oh, no, however will I ever come back from the damage of me speaking on Trevor Noah, a show that commands no audience. There are some days where I'm pretty sure you and I could probably put up better numbers than him. And that's saying a whole lot. Yeah. Point being.
Yeah, that dude, he gets,
My point being.
Oh, I think we lost him. Yep. I think we lost him. Oh, boy. Oh, he's froze, everybody. Big oof. Oh, man. Well, it is currently 1:08 p.m. I think we're going to have to cut it there, everybody. It was a good show. Glad we got a lot taken care of as far as episode 3 and 4. As always, I appreciate Byron being here, ByronOfSidius. Yeah. I think that's going to wrap it up, y'all. So take it easy, guys. Take care. And I will see you all in the next one. Probably Wednesday. We'll start 5 and 6 Wednesday and then try to finish up 7 and 8 on Friday. But as for that, that'll be that. Take care. I'll see y'all later.